The first one is the title story, and it starts like this. I never thought I'd have to defend my own property from someone trying to evict my family, but life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. This is the story of how a smug, entitled woman named Karen tried to kick my grandson out of my house, only to get the shock of her life when she realized who she was dealing with. My name is Margaret, and I'm a 68-year-old retired teacher. I've lived in the same modest two-story house in a quiet suburban neighborhood for over 40 years. My late husband and I bought it when we were newlyweds, and we raised our 2 children here. Now, in my golden years, I share the house with my 23-year-old grandson, Jake. Jake moved in with me about 6 months ago after graduating college. He's a good kid, hardworking, respectful, and always willing to help out around the house. He's been looking for a job in his field of environmental science, but the job market has been tough. In the meantime, he works part-time at a local coffee shop to help pay for groceries and utilities. I'm more than happy to have him stay with me while he gets on his feet. Our neighborhood has always been a friendly place, with most residents knowing each other by name. However, things started to change about a year ago when a new family moved in across the street. The Johnsons seemed nice enough at first, but it soon became clear that the wife, Karen, had a bit of a superiority complex. Karen was in her early 40s, with an immaculate blonde bob and a perpetual look of disdain on her face. She was the type who always had to one-up everyone else, bragging about her husband's job as a corporate lawyer and her children's numerous achievements. She appointed herself the unofficial neighborhood watchdog, constantly nitpicking about everything from the length of people's grass to the color of their mailboxes. At first, I tried to be friendly with Karen, inviting her over for tea and chatting when we saw each other outside. But her constant judgment and gossip quickly wore thin. I started limiting our interactions to polite waves and brief hellos. Everything came to a head one sunny Saturday afternoon in July. I was in my front yard, tending to my prized rose bushes, when I saw Karen marching across the street with a determined look on her face. I straightened up, wiping my brow with the back of my gardening glove. "Good afternoon, Karen," I said pleasantly, though I had a feeling this wasn't going to be a friendly chat. Karen's lips were pressed into a thin line as she came to a stop in front of me. "Margaret," she said curtly, "we need to talk about your situation." I raised an eyebrow. "My situation?" She nodded, her eyes darting towards my house. "Yes, the young man living with you. Your grandson, I believe?" "That's right," I confirmed, my guard going up. "Jake's been staying with me while he looks for a job in his field. Is there a problem?" Karen's nostrils flared slightly. "Well, as a matter of fact, there is. Several of us in the neighborhood have noticed that he comes and goes at odd hours, often late at night, and there have been reports of suspicious activity." I couldn't help but laugh. "Suspicious activity? Karen, Jake works at a coffee shop. Sometimes he has late shifts or early morning openings. That's hardly suspicious." She waved her hand dismissively. "Be that as it may, this is a family neighborhood. We can't have young, single men living here, especially those who can't support themselves. It brings down property values and attracts the wrong element." I felt my temper rising, but I took a deep breath to stay calm. "Jake is family, Karen. He's not some random tenant, and he contributes to the household expenses." Karen's eyes narrowed. "I'm sure you think you're doing a nice thing, Margaret, but you have to consider the impact on the rest of us. As president of the Homeowners Association, it's my duty to maintain the standards of our community." I blinked in surprise. This was the first I'd heard of Karen being the Homeowner Association president. Last I knew, old Mr. Jenkins held that position. But before I could question it, Karen barreled on. "I'm afraid I'm going to have to insist that your grandson move out within 30 days, she said, her tone dripping with false sympathy. "It's for the good of the neighborhood, you understand. We can't make exceptions, even for elderly residents who might be struggling financially." My jaw dropped. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This woman was actually trying to evict my grandson from my own house, and the condescending way she implied I was some helpless old lady who couldn't take care of herself. It was infuriating. "Now, listen here, Karen," I said, my voice low and controlled despite my anger. "I don't know where you got the idea that you have any say over who lives in my house, but let me make something very clear. This is my property, which I own outright. There is no mortgage. I am not part of any homeowner association, and even if I were, you would have no authority to dictate who can live with me." Karen's smug expression faltered for a moment, but she quickly recovered. "Oh, Margaret," she said with a patronizing smile, "I know you might be confused, but all houses in this neighborhood are part of the homeowner association. It's in the deed, and as president, I have every right to enforce our rules." I couldn't help but chuckle, which seemed to throw Karen off balance. "Is that so? Well then, I suggest you check your facts, because I can assure you that my house is not part of any homeowner association. Never has been." Karen's face turned an interesting shade of red. That's impossible. All the houses here?" I cut her off. "All the houses built in the last 20 years, maybe. But my house predates your precious homeowner association by at least 2 decades. When they tried to incorporate us, my husband and I, along with several other original homeowners, refused. We were grandfathered out." Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. I could almost see the gears turning in her head as she tried to process this information. But I wasn't done yet. Furthermore, I continued, warming to my topic, even if I were part of the homeowner association, which I most certainly am not, you would have no legal grounds to evict a family member from my home. And for your information, I am neither struggling financially nor in need of your misplaced concern about my living situation. I took a step closer to Karen, who instinctively backed up. Now, I've been patient with your busybody behavior up until now, Karen. I've ignored your snide comments and your constant meddling in everyone's business. But trying to kick my grandson out of my home? That crosses a line. Karen seemed to regain some of her bravado. Well, I still think it's inappropriate for a young man to be living here. What will people think? And the noise? The traffic? I held up a hand to stop her. What people think is none of my concern, nor should it be yours. Jake is a responsible adult who has every right to live with his grandmother. He doesn't throw parties, he keeps to himself, and he's a contributing member of this household. The only noise and traffic I've noticed lately is you, marching up and down the street looking for things to complain about. Karen's face was a mix of embarrassment and indignation. I'm just trying to look out for the neighborhood's best interests, she sputtered. No, Karen, I said firmly. You're trying to assert control over things that are none of your business. And in this case, you've made a fool of yourself by trying to claim authority you don't have. I could see the fight going out of her as the reality of the situation sank in. But I had one more thing to say. Oh, and Karen? I think you might want to double-check your claim about being the homeowner association president. Because I happened to run into Mr. Jenkins at the grocery store just yesterday, and he was telling me all about the upcoming homeowner association meeting he's organizing. Funny how he didn't mention being replaced. Karen's eyes widened in panic. She opened her mouth as if to say something, then quickly snapped it shut. Without another word, she turned on her heel and practically ran back across the street to her house. I watched her go, shaking my head in disbelief. As I turned to go back inside, I saw Jake standing in the doorway, a confused look on his face. Grandma, he said. What was that all about? I heard raised voices. I patted his arm as I walked past him into the house. Oh, nothing to worry about, dear. Just a nosy neighbor getting put in her place. Now, how about we have some lemonade, and I'll tell you all about it. Jake grinned and followed me into the kitchen. Sounds like quite a story. I always knew you were a badass, Grandma. I laughed as I pulled the lemonade out of the fridge. Language, young man. But yes, your grandmother can handle herself just fine. As we sat at the kitchen table, sipping our lemonade, I filled Jake in on the confrontation with Karen. His eyes grew wider with each detail, and by the end, he was shaking his head in amazement. I can't believe she tried to evict me, Jake said. And from your own house? The nerve of some people? I nodded in agreement. Some folks just can't stand to mind their own business. But don't you worry, Jake. This is your home for as long as you need it to be. Jake reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Thanks, Grandma. I really appreciate everything you've done for me. And I promise, as soon as I land a job in my field, I'll start looking for my own place. There's no rush, I assured him. I enjoy having you here. It's nice to have some company in this big old house. We spent the rest of the afternoon chatting and laughing, the incident with Karen already becoming a funny story to tell rather than a source of stress. Little did I know, however, that this was just the beginning of our troubles with the self-appointed neighborhood queen. Over the next few weeks, Karen seemed to make it her mission to find any reason to complain about us. She called the city to report our grass being a quarter-inch too long. She left passive-aggressive notes about Jake's car being parked on the street, which was completely legal. She even tried to start rumors among the other neighbors that we were running some sort of illegal boarding house. Most of our neighbors knew better than to listen to Karen's nonsense, but it was still frustrating to deal with her constant harassment. Jake felt terrible, thinking he was causing problems for me. Maybe I should just find somewhere else to live, Grandma, he said one evening after Karen had made a scene about him having a friend over to study. I don't want to make things difficult for you. I fixed him with a stern look. Now you listen to me, Jacob Michael Thompson. You are not going anywhere because of that woman's ridiculous behavior. This is your home, and you have every right to be here. Jake smiled weakly. I know, but... No buts, I interrupted. In fact, I think it's high time we put a stop to Karen's nonsense once and for all. The next day, I made a few phone calls. First, I contacted Mr. Jenkins, the actual homeowner association president, and filled him in on Karen's behavior and her false claims of authority. He was appalled, and assured me he would address the issue at the next meeting. Next, I called my old friend Martha, who happened to be a retired lawyer specializing in property law. After explaining the situation, she agreed to help me draft a formal cease and desist letter to Karen. Finally, I reached out to some of our other neighbors who I knew had also been on the receiving end of Karen's meddling. Many of them were more than happy to provide statements about her harassment and false claims. Armed with this information, I decided it was time for another chat with our troublesome neighbor. This time, however, I would be the one knocking on her door. It was a bright Sunday afternoon when I marched across the street, a folder tucked under my arm and determination in my step. I rang the doorbell and waited, secretly hoping Karen would be home to receive my message in person. Luck was on my side. The door swung open, revealing a surprised-looking Karen. Her eyes widened when she saw me standing there. Margaret, she said, her voice a mix of confusion and wariness. What are you doing here? I smiled politely. Hello, Karen. I was hoping we could have a little chat. May I come in? Karen hesitated for a moment before reluctantly stepping aside to let me enter. She led me to her immaculate living room, gesturing for me to sit on a pristine white couch that looked like it had never been used. What's this about? Karen asked as she perched on the edge of an armchair across from me. I opened my folder and pulled out a stack of papers. Well, Karen, I'm here to discuss your recent behavior towards me, my grandson, and several other neighbors. I'm afraid it's become quite problematic. Karen's face flushed. I don't know what you're talking about. I've only been trying to maintain the standards of our neighborhood. I raised an eyebrow. Is that so? Then perhaps you can explain why you've been falsely claiming to be the homeowner association president and attempting to enforce rules that don't exist? Karen's mouth fell open. I never. Please, Karen, I interrupted gently. Let's not make this more difficult than it needs to be. I've spoken with Mr. Jenkins, the actual homeowner association president. He was quite surprised to hear about your claims. I could see the panic rising in Karen's eyes as I continued. I've also collected statements from several neighbors detailing your harassment and false accusations. And let's not forget your attempt to evict my grandson from my own property. Karen's face had gone from red to pale. I was just trying to help, to keep the neighborhood nice. I leaned forward, my voice firm but not unkind. Karen, I understand you may have good intentions, but your actions have crossed a line. You have no authority to dictate how people live in their own homes, especially those of us who aren't even part of the homeowner association. I pulled out the cease and desist letter and handed it to her. This is a formal request for you to stop your harassing behavior immediately. It details the legal consequences if you continue. Karen's hands shook as she took the letter. Legal consequences? But I haven't done anything wrong. Making false claims of authority, spreading rumors, and attempting to interfere with people's living situations are all potentially actionable offenses, I explained. Now, I don't want to take this any further, Karen. I believe we can resolve this amicably. Karen seemed to deflate before my eyes. What do you want me to do? I smiled, relieved that she seemed to be coming to her senses. It's simple, really. Stop interfering in your neighbors' lives. No more false claims of authority, no more complaints about things that aren't your business, and absolutely no more attempts to dictate who can live where. Karen nodded slowly, still looking shell-shocked. Additionally, I continued, I think it would be appropriate for you to apologize to those you've harassed, including my grandson and me. Karen's pride seemed to bristle at this. Apologize? But I was just trying to. I held up a hand to stop her. Karen, please. We both know your actions went far beyond simple concern for the neighborhood. You've caused real distress to people, and an apology is the least you can do to make amends. She was quiet for a long moment, staring down at the letter in her hands. Finally, she looked up at me, her eyes watery. I'm sorry, Margaret. I never meant to cause trouble. I wanted to feel important, I guess. To have some control? Her admission took me by surprise. For the first time, I saw past Karen's prickly exterior to the insecure person underneath. I felt a twinge of sympathy, remembering how lost I had felt after my husband passed away. I understand, Karen, I said softly. Change can be difficult, and sometimes we look for ways to feel more in control of our lives. But it can't come at the expense of others' peace and happiness. Karen nodded, wiping at her eyes. You're right. I'll apologize to everyone. And I promise, no more meddling. I reached out and patted her hand. That's all we're asking for, Karen. And who knows? If you approach your neighbors with kindness instead of criticism, you might find yourself making some real friends in the community. As I stood to leave, Karen walked me to the door. Before I stepped out, she turned to me with a hesitant smile. Thank you, Margaret, for being firm but kind about this. I think I needed that wake-up call. I nodded. We all need a reality check sometimes, Karen. The important thing is how we respond to it. As I walked back across the street to my house, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I hoped this would be the end of our neighborhood drama, but only time would tell. When I got home, Jake was waiting anxiously in the living room. How did it go, Grandma? Is she going to leave us alone now? I sat down next to him on the couch with a sigh. I think so, dear. Karen seemed to realize the error of her ways. She's promised to apologize and stop her meddling. Jake looked skeptical. Do you really think she'll change? I shrugged. People can surprise you, Jake. Sometimes they just need a little nudge in the right direction. We'll give her a chance to make things right. Over the next few weeks, we saw a remarkable change in Karen's behavior. True to her word, she went around the neighborhood, apologizing to everyone she had wronged. Some people were wary at first, but as time went on and Karen's improved attitude held, the atmosphere in the neighborhood began to shift. One Saturday morning, about a month after our confrontation, there was a knock at our door. Jake answered it, and to both our surprises, it was Karen standing there with a basket of muffins. Good morning, she said, her voice tentative. I baked these as a peace offering. I was hoping we could start fresh. Jake looked at me, unsure how to respond. I nodded encouragingly and stepped forward. That's very kind of you, Karen. Why don't you come in for some coffee? Karen's face lit up with a genuine smile, probably the first I'd ever seen from her. I'd like that, thank you. As we sat around the kitchen table, sipping coffee and nibbling on, surprisingly delicious, blueberry muffins, the conversation slowly became more relaxed. Karen asked Jake about his job search, showing real interest without any judgment. She even offered to put in a good word for him with her husband's firm, which had an environmental consulting division. I can't promise anything, she said, but I know they're always looking for bright young people with fresh ideas. Jake's eyes widened. That would be amazing. Thank you, Karen. She waved her hand dismissively, but I could see she was pleased. It's the least I can do after all the trouble I caused. As Karen was leaving, she turned to me with a serious expression. Margaret, I want you to know how sorry I am for everything. You were right to stand up to me. I've been talking to a therapist, trying to work through some of my issues. It's helping me understand why I acted the way I did. I reached out and squeezed her arm. That takes courage, Karen. I'm proud of you for making that effort. She smiled, her eyes misty. Thank you. And thank you for not giving up on me as a neighbor. I hope we can be friends going forward. I'd like that, I said, and I meant it. As we watched Karen walk back to her house, Jake turned to me with a grin. Grandma, you're amazing. You not only stood up to her, but you actually helped her become a better person. I chuckled. Oh, I don't know about that. Karen did the hard work herself. Sometimes people just need a little push to see the error of their ways. Jake hugged me tightly. Well, I'm glad you're my grandma. You're like a real-life superhero. I laughed and patted his back. No cape or tights for me. Thank you very much. Now, how about we go over your resume? If Karen comes through with that connection at her husband's firm, we want you to be prepared. As we spent the afternoon polishing Jake's resume, I couldn't help but feel grateful for how things had turned out. What had started as a stressful confrontation had led to positive changes, not just for us, but for the whole neighborhood. It was a reminder that sometimes, standing up for what's right can have far-reaching effects. In the months that followed, our neighborhood became a more friendly and inclusive place. Karen, true to her word, continued to work on herself and became an unexpectedly strong advocate for community harmony. She even stepped up to help when one of our elderly neighbors needed assistance with home repairs, organizing a neighborhood volunteer day. As for Jake, Karen's connection did indeed lead to an interview at her husband's firm. While he didn't get that particular job, the experience boosted his confidence and helped him refine his interview skills. A few weeks later, he landed a position with a local environmental nonprofit, allowing him to stay in the area and continue living with me while he saved up for his own place. Looking back on that summer, I'm reminded of an old saying, the only way to have a friend is to be one. By choosing to approach Karen with firmness but also with empathy, we not only solved our immediate problem but also gained an unexpected ally and friend. It just goes to show that sometimes, the best way to deal with difficult people is to give them a chance to be better. You never know, you might be surprised by the results. Are you hungry for more slices of stories? Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell to never miss out on any videos. See you tomorrow at Story Slices.